On the family vacation, my daughter-in-law yelled at the hotel clerk, "Don't talk to the old lady. She's just the maid." My son burst out laughing. She had no idea I owned the hotel. What I did next sent her into a panic. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached." I had been looking forward to this vacation for months. At 72, I didn't get many opportunities to spend quality time with my son Marcus and his family. When he suggested we all go to Clearwater Beach for a week, my heart swelled with hope. Maybe this would be the chance to finally connect with my daughter-in-law, Isla, who had always kept me at arm's length during their 5-year marriage. The drive to the Ocean View Resort took 4 hours, and I spent most of it in the back seat listening to Marcus and Isla discuss their plans. They talked about spa appointments, golf reservations, and expensive dinners as if I wasn't there. When I tried to contribute to the conversation, asking about the kids or suggesting activities we could all do together, Isla would respond with short, clipped answers, while Marcus simply ignored me altogether. I should have seen the warning signs then, but I was too desperate for family connection to pay attention. The Ocean View Resort was one of my crown jewels, though my family had no idea. I had built my hotel empire from nothing after my husband died when Marcus was just 12. Starting with a small bed and breakfast, I had worked 18-hour days, scrubbed floors, handled bookings, and slowly expanded until I owned 17 properties across 3 states. But I had always kept my business life separate from my family, wanting Marcus to love me for who I was, not what I owned. As we pulled up to the elegant entrance, I felt a familiar pride seeing the pristine landscaping and the uniformed valets rushing to help guests. The ocean view had taken me 3 years to acquire, and another 2 to renovate to perfection. Every detail, from the marble floors to the crystal chandeliers, had been personally chosen by me. Marcus handed the keys to the valet while Isla adjusted her designer sunglasses and smoothed her blonde hair. She was beautiful, I had to admit, with the kind of polished perfection that came from expensive salons and personal trainers. At 35, she was 20 years younger than Marcus and never let anyone forget it. "Remember," she said to Marcus as we approached the entrance, "I want the penthouse suite. I don't care what they say about availability. Make it happen." Marcus nodded obediently. It always amazed and saddened me how completely he bent to her will. The confident boy I had raised had somehow become a man who couldn't make a decision without his wife's approval. We walked into the stunning lobby, and I couldn't help but smile at the familiar bustle of activity. Sarah, the front desk manager, looked up as we approached. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw me, but I gave her the slightest shake of my head. I wasn't ready to reveal my identity yet. "Good afternoon," Sarah said professionally. "Welcome to the Ocean View Resort. How may I assist you?" "Reservation for Whitman," Marcus said. "We should have the penthouse suite." Sarah checked her computer, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "I see your reservation here, Mr. Whitman. You're confirmed for our deluxe Ocean View suite, but I'm afraid the penthouse is occupied for the duration of your stay." I watched Isla's face darken. Her jaw tightened, and I could see the storm brewing behind her perfectly applied makeup. "That's unacceptable," Isla snapped. "Do you know who we are? I specifically requested the penthouse when we made this reservation." Sarah maintained her professional composure, though I could see the slight tension in her shoulders. "I apologize for any confusion, Mrs. Whitman. The deluxe suite is quite lovely, with a private balcony, and I don't want to hear about some inferior room." Isla's voice rose, drawing attention from other guests in the lobby. "I want the penthouse, and I want it now." I stepped forward slightly, hoping to diffuse the situation. "Isla, perhaps we could—" That's when it happened. The moment that would change everything between us forever. Isla whirled around, her face contorted with fury. "Don't you dare speak!" she screamed at me, her voice echoing through the marble lobby. "Sarah, or whatever your name is, don't listen to anything this old woman says. She's nobody important. She's just the help we brought along." The lobby fell silent. Other guests stopped their conversations and turned to stare. I felt heat rush to my cheeks as humiliation washed over me like a cold wave. But Isla wasn't finished. "Don't talk to the old woman," she shouted, pointing at me like I was some kind of pest. "She's just the maid, the babysitter. Don't waste your time with her." I stood frozen, my mouth dry, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. In all my 72 years, no one had ever spoken to me with such venom, such complete disrespect, and certainly not in front of a lobby full of strangers. But what happened next cut even deeper than Isla's cruelty. Marcus threw back his head and laughed. Not a nervous laugh or an uncomfortable chuckle, but genuine, delighted laughter. As if his wife humiliating his mother in public was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. "Oh God, Isla," he said between laughs, wiping tears from his eyes. "You're terrible, but you're not wrong. Mom, just let us handle this, okay? Go sit down somewhere." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. This was my son. The boy I had raised alone, worked myself to the bone for, sacrificed everything to give the best life possible. And he was laughing at my humiliation. Sarah's face had gone pale, and she was looking at me with a mixture of shock and sympathy that only made things worse. Around the lobby, I could hear whispers and see people pointing. Some were holding up their phones, probably recording the whole terrible scene. "Ma'am," Sarah said quietly, her voice gentle but professional. "Perhaps you'd like to take a seat in our lounge while we sort out the room situation." Before I could respond, Isla let out an exaggerated sigh. "Yes, take the old bat somewhere she won't embarrass us further, and make sure someone keeps an eye on her. She tends to wander off." More laughter from Marcus, more stares from strangers, more pieces of my heart breaking with each passing second. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to run from that beautiful lobby, from my cruel daughter-in-law, from my laughing son, and never look back. But something deep inside me, some remnant of the strength that had built this empire, kept me standing. I looked at Sarah, who was watching me with barely concealed distress. She knew who I was. She knew that with one word from me, Isla would be thrown out of this hotel so fast her designer heels wouldn't touch the ground. But I said nothing. Not yet. Instead, I picked up my small suitcase and walked toward the elevator, my spine straight, despite the weight of humiliation pressing down on me. Behind me, I could hear Isla continuing to berate Sarah about the penthouse suite, her voice filled with the kind of entitlement that comes from never having worked for anything in your life. As the elevator doors closed, I caught Sarah's eye one last time. She gave me the smallest nod, a gesture that said she understood, she was sorry, and she was waiting for my signal. I had built this empire with my own hands. I employed over 300 people across my properties. I was respected in business circles, consulted by other hotel owners, and known for my fairness and integrity. But in that lobby, I was just a pathetic old woman being screamed at by her son's wife while he laughed at my pain. The elevator rose to the 12th floor, and with each passing number, something inside me began to change. The hurt was still there, sharp and deep, but something else was growing alongside it. Determination. The next morning, I woke up in what should have been paradise but felt more like purgatory. My room overlooked the ocean, with waves gently lapping at the pristine beach below. The sunrise painted the sky in shades of pink and gold that I would have normally found breathtaking. Instead, I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left only an empty shell. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Isla's voice screaming, "She's just the maid," and Marcus's laughter echoing through my mind. I kept replaying the scene, wondering what I could have said or done differently. Though deep down, I knew the problem wasn't my reaction. The problem was that my own family saw me as disposable. A soft knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. When I opened it, I found Marcus standing in the hallway, looking uncomfortable but not apologetic. "Mom, we're heading down to breakfast. Isla wants you to watch the kids by the pool afterward so we can go to the spa." Not, "Good morning." Not, "How did you sleep?" Not even an acknowledgement of what had happened in the lobby. Just another order disguised as a request. "Marcus," I said quietly, "about last night." He waved his hand dismissively. "Mom, don't make a big deal out of nothing. Isla was just stressed about the room situation. You know how she gets when things don't go according to plan." Nothing. He called his wife's public humiliation of me nothing. "She called me the maid, Marcus. She screamed at me in front of strangers." Marcus shifted uncomfortably, looking everywhere but at my face. "She didn't mean anything by it. That's just Isla being dramatic. Look, can we not do this whole thing? We're supposed to be on vacation." I stared at my son, searching for any trace of the boy I had raised. The boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who brought me dandelions from the yard and called them sunshine flowers, who had once told me I was the strongest person in the world. That boy was gone, replaced by a 47-year-old man who chose his wife's comfort over his mother's dignity. "Fine," I said, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. "I'll watch the children." Marcus's relief was palpable. "Great. We'll probably be gone most of the day. The spa, then lunch, maybe some shopping. You don't mind, right?" Of course I minded. I had hoped this vacation would be about family time, about getting to know my grandchildren better, about feeling like I belonged somewhere. Instead, I was being relegated to the role of unpaid babysitter. But I nodded anyway, because saying no would cause a scene, and I had learned long ago that keeping the peace was more important than standing up for myself. The breakfast restaurant was buzzing with vacationers enjoying their morning meals. Isla had commandeered a table by the window, the best spot in the room, and was already ordering the staff around like she owned the place, which, in a cruel twist of irony, she kind of did, at least as far as she knew. "I want fresh orange juice, not that concentrate garbage," she was telling our server, a young man named David who I recognized from previous visits, "and make sure the eggs are cooked exactly 3 minutes, not a second more or less. I can tell the difference." David nodded patiently, though I could see the strain around his eyes. I had trained my staff to provide exceptional service, but Isla was testing even their considerable patience. My grandchildren, Emma and Jake, aged 8 and 10, were sitting quietly at the table, their faces glued to their tablets. They barely looked up when I approached. "Good morning, sweetheart," I said to Emma, reaching out to smooth her hair. Isla's hand shot out and blocked mine. "Don't touch her. She just had her hair done yesterday, and I don't want it messed up." I pulled my hand back as if I'd been burned. Emma didn't even look up from her screen. "Kids, say good morning to Grandma Norma," Marcus said half-heartedly. "Morning," they mumbled in unison, still not looking at me. I sat down in the only remaining chair, which happened to be the one facing away from the ocean view. Isla had made sure the best seats were reserved for her family, while I got the leftover spot like an afterthought. "Norma?" Isla said, not bothering to look at me while she spoke. "After breakfast, you'll take the kids to the pool. Make sure they put on sunscreen every hour. Emma burns easily, and if she gets even a little pink, I'll hold you responsible." I nodded, swallowing the words I wanted to say, "and keep them away from the deep end. And don't let them eat any of the poolside snacks. They're full of preservatives. Oh, and if they need anything at all, you call me immediately. Don't try to handle it yourself." Each instruction felt like another small cut, another reminder that I wasn't trusted to care for my own grandchildren without supervision and criticism. "How long will you be at the spa?" I asked. Isla finally looked at me, her expression cold. "As long as we want. This is our vacation, not yours. You're here to help, remember?" Marcus said nothing. He was reading something on his phone, completely checked out of the conversation. I wondered when he had become this person, this man who let his wife treat his mother like hired help. After breakfast, I found myself by the pool with Emma and Jake, trying to engage them in conversation while they remained absorbed in their devices. The other families around us were laughing, playing games, actually interacting with each other. We looked like strangers who happened to be sitting at the same table. "Grandma?" Emma said suddenly, and my heart leaped with hope that she might actually want to talk to me. "Yes, sweetheart?" "Mom says you used to clean houses for rich people. Is that true?" The question hit me like a slap. I had worked hard my entire life, yes, but I had never cleaned houses for anyone. I had built an empire from nothing, created jobs for hundreds of people, earned respect in a male-dominated industry, but somehow, in Isla's twisted version of my history, I had been reduced to a maid. "No, honey," I said gently. "I own businesses. I build hotels." Jake looked up from his tablet for the first time all morning. "Mom says you make up stories about being important because you're embarrassed about being poor." The cruelty of it took my breath away. Isla hadn't just humiliated me in public. She had been poisoning my grandchildren against me, filling their young minds with lies designed to make them see me as pathetic and delusional. Your grandmother is not poor, and she doesn't make up stories, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Emma shrugged. That's what Mom says. She says you live in a tiny apartment and pretend to be rich to make yourself feel better. I lived in a penthouse overlooking the bay, worth more than most people's entire net worth, but my grandchildren thought I was a pathetic old woman living in squalor and lying about my accomplishments. For the next 6 hours, I sat by that pool, watching children who barely acknowledged my existence, while their parents enjoyed themselves at my expense. Other guests occasionally struck up conversations with me, and I found myself making polite small talk, while inside I was dying a little more with each passing minute. When Marcus and Isla finally returned, they were glowing from their spa treatments and expensive lunch. Isla's nails were freshly manicured, her hair styled to perfection. She looked like a woman who had spent the day being pampered, which she had, at a spa I owned, with services I ultimately paid for. How were the kids? Marcus asked, though he was already looking at his phone again. Fine, I said, because what else could I say? That they thought I was a liar and a maid? That their mother had systematically destroyed any chance of a real relationship between us? Good, Isla said, not really listening. Tomorrow you're watching them again. We have golf in the morning and then lunch with some friends we met at the spa. I watched my son nod along with his wife's plans, never once asking if I minded. Never considering that I might have wanted to spend my vacation doing something other than providing free childcare. That night, as I sat alone in my room overlooking the ocean I had worked so hard to own, I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. I wasn't on a family vacation. I was on a work trip, hired to be the help while my son and his wife enjoyed themselves. The only difference was that instead of being paid for my services, I was paying for the privilege of being treated like dirt. But as I sat there in the darkness, watching the waves crash against the shore, something began to shift inside me. The hurt was still there, deeper than ever, but it was being joined by something else: anger. Pure, clean anger at being taken for granted, at being lied about, at being treated like I was nothing when I had built everything. Tomorrow, I decided, things were going to start changing. The third day of our vacation started like the previous two, with me receiving my marching orders from Isla while Marcus nodded along like an obedient puppet. This time, they were planning a day trip to a nearby wine country, and I was expected to stay behind with the children. Make sure they eat lunch at exactly noon, Isla instructed, applying lipstick with the precision of a surgeon. And Emma gets cranky if her blood sugar drops, so keep those granola bars I packed handy. I wanted to point out that I had raised a child successfully, that I knew how to feed and care for children, but I had learned that any defense of my capabilities would only result in more detailed instructions and implied criticism. We'll probably be back around 6, Marcus said, barely looking up from his phone. Maybe later if the traffic is bad. As they prepared to leave, I overheard Isla on the phone with someone, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she thought she was being clever. No, we can't do dinner tonight. I'm stuck babysitting duty again. I know, it's ridiculous, but it's only for a few more days. Trust me, once this is all sorted out, we won't have to deal with this anymore. Something cold settled in my stomach. The way she said, "Once this is all sorted out," didn't sound like she was just talking about the end of our vacation. After they left, I took the children to the hotel's kids club, a service I had personally designed to give families more flexibility during their stays. The counselors were wonderful with Emma and Jake, and for the first time since we'd arrived, I saw them actually smile and interact with other children their age. With a few hours to myself, I decided to take a walk around the property. It had been years since I'd been able to just observe my hotel as a guest rather than an owner, and I wanted to see how things were really running. That's when I overheard the conversation that changed everything. I was walking past the pool bar when I heard familiar voices from one of the private cabanas. Marcus and Isla were supposed to be at wine country, but there they were, hidden behind the canvas walls, talking in hushed tones with another couple I didn't recognize. The thing is, Isla was saying, she's getting old, and old people don't live forever, if you know what I mean. A woman's voice I didn't recognize laughed. Isla, you're terrible. I'm practical, Isla replied. Marcus is an only child, so everything will come to us eventually. The question is just how long we have to wait. My blood ran cold. I stepped closer to the cabana, staying hidden behind a large palm tree. What about the old woman herself? The unknown man asked. Doesn't she have any money of her own? Marcus's voice, my own son's voice, made my heart stop. Mom? God, no, she's broke as hell. Lives in this tiny apartment, barely gets by on Social Security. I've been supporting her for years. The lies came so easily from his mouth that I wondered how long he had been telling them. I lived in a penthouse worth $3 million. My monthly income from investments alone was more than most people made in a year. But somehow, in Marcus's version of reality, I was a burden he generously supported. That's why this whole vacation thing is such a pain, Isla continued. We have to drag her along everywhere because she can't afford to do anything on her own. It's like having a pathetic pet that you can't get rid of. The other woman made sympathetic noises. How awful for you. And she probably expects you to take care of her when she gets really old and sick. Over my dead body, Isla said with a vicious laugh. The minute she starts needing real care, she's going straight to a state facility. I'm not turning my house into a nursing home for some useless old woman. I gripped the palm tree to steady myself. They weren't just talking about waiting for me to die naturally. They were planning to abandon me the moment I became inconvenient. But Marcus's next words were the ones that truly shattered my heart. The funny thing is, she still thinks she's important, he said, and I could hear the cruel amusement in his voice. She tells these ridiculous stories about owning businesses and being successful. It's actually kind of sad how delusional she's become. Dementia? The unknown man asked. Maybe, Marcus replied, or just desperate to feel like she matters. Either way, it's embarrassing. Yesterday, she tried to tell the kids she owns hotels. Hotels? Can you imagine? They all laughed, the sound cutting through me like broken glass. Well, Isla said, at least we won't have to deal with her crazy stories much longer. I give her maybe 5 more years, 10 at the outside. And then we'll finally be free to live our lives without having to pretend we care about a worthless old woman who never amounted to anything. I stood there behind that palm tree, feeling like my entire world was collapsing around me. These weren't strangers talking about some unfortunate relative. This was my son and his wife, discussing my death like it was a long-awaited vacation they were planning. The best part, Isla continued, is that she's so grateful for any attention we give her. Like this vacation, she actually thinks we invited her because we want her here. She has no idea we only brought her along to watch the kids so we could have some fun. More laughter, more casual cruelty. Does she at least help with expenses? The other woman asked. Are you kidding? Isla scoffed. She's completely useless financially. Marcus pays for everything. Her groceries, her utilities, this vacation. She's a complete drain on our resources. Another lie. I had been supporting Marcus financially for years, helping with his mortgage payments, his children's private school tuition, even Isla's shopping sprees. The credit card bills that came to my address were staggering, but I had paid them without complaint because I thought I was helping my family. The only good thing about having her around, Marcus said, is that she makes a decent babysitter. Free childcare, you know, and she's so desperate for our approval that she'll do whatever we ask. It's actually kind of funny, Isla added, watching her try so hard to make us love her. She brings expensive gifts for the kids, always volunteers to help with anything we need. It's pathetic, really, but useful. I had heard enough. More than enough. I stumbled away from the cabana, my vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. Not here. Not where they might see me and know I had discovered their true feelings. I made it back to my room before the dam burst. Sitting on the edge of my bed, I finally let myself feel the full weight of what I had learned. My son, the boy I had raised alone after his father died, the child I had worked 18-hour days to support, thought I was a worthless burden he couldn't wait to be rid of. My daughter-in-law, who had smiled at me through 5 years of family dinners and holiday gatherings, saw me as nothing more than free labor and a convenient scapegoat for her own inadequacies. And my grandchildren, innocent as they were, had been taught to see me as a liar and a drain on their family's resources. I sat in that hotel room, my hotel room in my hotel, built with my money and my sweat, and realized that I had spent years pouring love and support into people who not only didn't appreciate it, but actively resented me for it. The phone rang, startling me out of my dark thoughts. It was the front desk. "Mrs. Whitman, this is Sarah from the front desk. I hope you don't mind me calling, but I wanted to check if everything was all right. Some of the staff mentioned they were concerned about you." Sarah's kindness, the genuine care in her voice from someone who was essentially a stranger, made me realize how starved I had become for basic human decency. "I'm fine, Sarah. Thank you for asking. Are you sure? If there's anything we can do to make your stay more comfortable." I almost laughed at the irony. Here was an employee of mine, someone I paid to provide service to guests, showing me more consideration than my own family had in years. "Actually, Sarah, there is something you can do for me." "Of course. What do you need?" I took a deep breath, feeling something shift inside me like tectonic plates finding a new alignment. "I need you to prepare a detailed record of all the charges to my son's room. Everything. Meals, services, incidentals. I want a complete accounting." There was a pause. "Certainly. May I ask what this is regarding?" "Let's just say I'm beginning to see some things more clearly than I have in a long time." As I hung up the phone, I walked to the window and looked out at the ocean. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. It was beautiful, but for the first time in 3 days, I wasn't just admiring the view. I was planning. My family wanted to treat me like I was nothing, like I was just some pathetic old woman they had to tolerate until I died. They were about to learn exactly who they were dealing with. That evening, Marcus and Isla returned from their fake wine country trip, flushed with sun and satisfaction from their day of deception. They swept into the hotel lobby like conquering heroes, completely unaware that I had overheard every cruel word of their conversation by the pool. "Mom!" Marcus called out when he spotted me in the lounge with the children. "How was your day? I hope the kids weren't too much trouble." The casual concern in his voice might have fooled me yesterday, but now I heard it for what it really was. A performance designed to maintain the illusion that he cared about my well-being. "They were perfect angels," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "We had a lovely time at the kids' club, didn't we?" Emma and Jake nodded absently, already gravitating toward their parents like planets pulled into orbit. I noticed how they barely acknowledged my presence once Marcus and Isla arrived, as if I became invisible the moment their real family showed up. "Great," Isla said, not really listening as she checked her reflection in her phone's camera. "We're going to dinner at that new seafood place downtown. You don't mind staying in tonight, do you? The kids need to get to bed early anyway." It wasn't a question. It never was. "Of course," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. As they prepared to leave for yet another evening without me, I excused myself to make a phone call. Back in my room, I dialed a number I hadn't used in months. "Richard, it's Norma Whitman." Richard Harrison had been my business attorney for 15 years, a sharp man who understood both the legal and practical sides of running a hotel empire. If anyone could help me navigate what I was planning, it was him. "Norma, what a pleasant surprise. How's retirement treating you?" I almost smiled at that. Retirement. I had stepped back from day-to-day operations, but I was far from retired. "Richard, I need some information. Hypothetically speaking, if someone were fraudulently using credit cards linked to my accounts, what would be my legal recourse?" There was a pause. "That's quite specific for a hypothetical question. Are you having problems?" "Let's just say I'm considering some changes to my financial arrangements. What about family members who are authorized users but have been misrepresenting the source of their funding?" "Norma, if someone is committing credit card fraud using your accounts, that's a serious criminal matter, even if they're family members. Are you telling me that's what's happening?" I looked out at the ocean, watching the moonlight dance on the waves. "I'm telling you I'm tired of being taken advantage of, and I want to know my options." Over the next 30 minutes, Richard outlined exactly what those options were. The picture he painted was both sobering and liberating. I had more power than I had realized, and Marcus and Isla had made more mistakes than they knew. After hanging up with Richard, I called Sarah at the front desk. "Mrs. Whitman, how can I help you?" "Sarah, I'd like you to prepare a comprehensive report for me. I want to know every service my son's family has used since they arrived, every special request they've made, and every interaction they've had with the staff. Certainly. Is there a particular reason you need this information? I chose my words carefully. Let's say I'm conducting a quality assessment of our guest services. I want to make sure our procedures are being followed correctly. Of course. I'll have that ready for you first thing in the morning. The next morning arrived gray and overcast, matching my mood perfectly. I had barely slept, my mind racing with plans and possibilities, but for the first time in days, I felt purposeful instead of helpless. I met Sarah in her office at 7 a.m. before Marcus and Isla would be awake. The report she handed me was more damning than I had expected. Your daughter-in-law has made 17 separate complaints since arrival, Sarah said quietly. She's demanded room upgrades, special meal preparations, and has been quite rude to several staff members. I flipped through the pages, reading account after account of Isla's entitled behavior. She had berated a housekeeper for not arranging her shoes properly. She had sent back 3 different meals because they weren't perfect. She had demanded that the pool area be cleared of other children so Emma and Jake could swim alone. What about my son? I asked. Sarah's expression was carefully neutral. He's been less involved, but he supported his wife in every complaint and demand. Of course he had. Marcus had perfected the art of enabling Isla's worst behavior while maintaining plausible deniability. There's something else, Sarah said, her voice dropping even lower. Yesterday, when they thought no one was listening, Mrs. Isla was quite vocal about her opinions regarding the hotel management. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? She told another guest that the service here was adequate, but that the ownership was probably some old money family who didn't care about quality anymore. She said she could run this place better than whoever was in charge. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so infuriating. Thank you, Sarah. This is very helpful. As I walked back toward the elevator, I ran into David, the young server who had been waiting on us at breakfast. He looked nervous when he saw me. Mrs. Whitman, he said quietly, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I wanted you to know that the staff has noticed how your family treats you. I stopped walking. What do you mean? David glanced around to make sure we weren't overheard. We all know who you are, ma'am. You've been nothing but kind to us over the years, but watching how they talk to you, how they treat you like you're nobody important, it doesn't sit right with any of us. The loyalty of my employees, people who had no obligation to defend me, touched something deep in my chest. These were people who respected me, who valued my leadership and fairness. The contrast with my own family was stark and painful. Thank you, David. That means more to me than you know. He nodded. If there's anything we can do. Actually, there is. I want you to continue providing excellent service to my son's family, but I also want you to document everything they do and say. Can you do that for me? Absolutely. Over the next 2 days, I became a different kind of observer. Instead of sitting passively while Isla ordered me around and Marcus ignored me, I watched them with the calculating eye of a businesswoman who had built an empire by understanding people's motivations and weaknesses. What I saw was even worse than I had imagined. Isla wasn't just entitled. She was cruel. I watched her reduce a young housekeeper to tears because the towels weren't folded to her exact specifications. I saw her throw a genuine tantrum when the poolside service was too slow, screaming at a server who was clearly doing his best. Marcus wasn't just passive, he was complicit. He encouraged Isla's worst behavior, laughing when she made cutting remarks about the staff, adding his own complaints to hers, treating the people who worked for me like they were less than human. But it was their treatment of Emma and Jake that finally pushed me over the edge. I was watching the children play in the pool when Emma scraped her knee on the rough edge of the diving board. It was a minor injury, barely bleeding, but she was crying and wanted comfort. When Isla arrived, instead of consoling her daughter, she immediately began berating the lifeguard for not preventing the accident. Then she turned to me. "This is your fault," she snapped. "I told you to watch them carefully. If you had been paying attention instead of daydreaming, this wouldn't have happened." Emma was still crying, but both her parents were too busy assigning blame to comfort her. I knelt down and gently cleaned the small scrape, applying a bandage from the first aid kit while Emma sniffled against my shoulder. "It's okay, sweetheart," I whispered. "You're very brave." Grandma Norma, Emma said quietly. Why doesn't Mommy like you? The innocent question hit me like a physical blow. This 8-year-old child had noticed what I had been trying to ignore, that her mother treated me with open hostility. Before I could answer, Isla's voice cut through the air like a whip. Emma, get away from her right now. I told you not to get too attached to Grandma. She won't be around much longer anyway. The callousness of it, the casual cruelty directed at both me and her own daughter, was the final straw. That night, I made a series of phone calls that would change everything. I called Richard again, this time with specific instructions. I called my accountant with detailed requests for financial records. And I called Tom Peterson, the general manager of my hotel chain, with orders that would go into effect immediately. As I hung up from the last call, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back at me looked older than her 72 years, worn down by days of humiliation and emotional abuse. But there was something new in her eyes, something that hadn't been there since this nightmare vacation began. Power, and the absolute determination to use it. Tomorrow was our last full day at the resort. Marcus and Isla had planned one final spectacular day of treating me like hired help while they enjoyed themselves at my expense. They had no idea they were about to discover exactly who they had been pushing around. Our final day at the Ocean View Resort dawned bright and cloudless, the kind of perfect beach day that graced our brochures and brought guests back year after year. But as I prepared for what I knew would be the most important day of my life in decades, the beautiful weather felt almost mocking. Isla had outdone herself planning our farewell dinner. She had booked the hotel's most exclusive private dining room, the one that overlooked the ocean and cost more per night than most people's monthly salary. Of course, she had no idea that every dollar she was spending came from my accounts, filtered through the credit cards I had foolishly allowed Marcus to use. Tonight is going to be perfect, she announced over breakfast, her voice carrying that particular note of self-satisfaction that I had learned to recognize. I've invited some of the lovely people we met this week to join us, the Hendersons, the Martins, and that charming couple from Boston. Marcus nodded approvingly. Sounds great, honey. Mom, you'll be able to keep the kids entertained during dinner, right? They get restless during adult conversations. Even now, even on our last day, I was being relegated to the children's table while strangers enjoyed an expensive meal at my expense. Of course, I said quietly. But inside, something was crystallizing into diamond-hard resolve. I spent the morning making final preparations. Richard had worked through the night to ensure everything was legally bulletproof. Tom Peterson had briefed the key staff members who would need to know the truth. And I had practiced in the mirror until I could deliver my words without my voice shaking. At 3 o'clock, I received the call I had been waiting for. Mrs. Whitman, this is Detective Morrison from the County Sheriff's Office. We've reviewed the financial documents your attorney provided. Based on the evidence of unauthorized charges and misrepresentation, we can proceed whenever you're ready. Thank you, Detective. I'll call you when it's time. The afternoon dragged by with agonizing slowness. Isla spent hours getting ready, transforming herself into the picture of elegant sophistication that she wore like armor against the world. Marcus pressed his best shirt and shined his shoes, preparing to play the role of successful businessman for their new friends. Neither of them bothered to ask what I was wearing or if I needed help getting ready. In their minds, I was just the help, and the help didn't need to look presentable for their important dinner. At 7 o'clock sharp, we gathered in the Sunset Terrace, the crown jewel of my resort's dining venues. The room was spectacular, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering an unobstructed view of the ocean and a private balcony where guests could step out to feel the sea breeze. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables set with the finest linens and china. I had designed this room myself, choosing every detail from the hand-painted murals to the imported marble floors. It was meant to be a place where special moments were celebrated, where memories were made that would last a lifetime. Tonight, it would serve a very different purpose. The other guests were already seated when we arrived, 6 well-dressed couples who had clearly been impressed by Isla's charm and Marcus's easy confidence over the past week. They greeted us warmly, though I noticed their attention focused primarily on Isla and Marcus while I received polite but dismissive nods. Everyone, This is Marcus's mother, Isla said, gesturing toward me with the same enthusiasm she might show for an unfortunate but necessary piece of furniture. She's been helping us with the children this week. Helping, as if I were the hired nanny rather than a family member on vacation. The conversation flowed around me as course after course of exquisite food was served. Isla held court like a queen, regaling the table with stories of their travels and future plans. Marcus played the part of devoted husband, laughing at her jokes and adding details that made them both sound more worldly and successful than they actually were. I sat at the far end of the table with Emma and Jake, helping them cut their food and keeping them quiet while the adults enjoyed their evening. Several times, when the children asked perfectly reasonable questions or made innocent comments, Isla would shoot sharp looks in my direction, as if their normal childhood behavior was somehow my fault. "Norma," she said during a brief lull in conversation, her voice carrying just enough volume to ensure everyone heard, "Could you take the children out to the balcony? They're getting a bit restless, and I'd hate for them to disturb everyone's meal." It was the perfect moment. I had been waiting for her to dismiss me publicly, to demonstrate her casual cruelty in front of an audience. Now, with witnesses present and the stage set exactly as I had planned, it was time. I stood up slowly, placing my napkin on the table with deliberate precision. The conversation continued around me as I walked toward the head of the table where Isla sat, radiant in her borrowed finery, completely unaware that her world was about to collapse. "Actually, Isla," I said, my voice calm but carrying clearly through the room, "I think it's time we had an honest conversation." The table fell silent. Isla looked up at me with irritation rather than concern, clearly annoyed that I had interrupted her performance. "What are you talking about? I asked you to take the children outside." "I know what you asked," I replied, moving to stand directly behind her chair. "Just like I know about your conversation by the pool cabana 3 days ago. The one where you discussed how long you think I have to live and how happy you'll be when I'm dead." Isla's face went white, but she recovered quickly, forcing a laugh that sounded brittle in the suddenly tense air. "I have no idea what you're talking about. You must have misunderstood something." "Did I misunderstand when you called me a worthless old woman? Or when you said you'd put me in a state facility the moment I became inconvenient? Or perhaps I misunderstood when my son laughed about how delusional I am for claiming to own businesses." Marcus was staring at me now, his face a mixture of shock and growing panic. Around the table, the other guests were exchanging uncomfortable glances, clearly wishing they were anywhere else. "Mom," Marcus said, his voice tight with warning, "maybe we should discuss this privately." "Oh, I think we've had enough private discussions," I replied, never taking my eyes off Isla's face. "I think it's time for some public truth." I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder thick with documents. The sound of papers rustling seemed unnaturally loud in the silent room. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, addressing the entire table, "I'd like to introduce myself properly. My name is Norma Whitman, and I am the owner and founder of Whitman Hospitality Group." Gasps echoed around the table. One of the women covered her mouth with her hand. "This hotel, the Ocean View Resort, is one of 17 properties in my portfolio. The meal you're enjoying tonight, the rooms you've been staying in, the staff who have been serving you, all of it belongs to me." Isla's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Marcus had gone completely still, his face drained of all color. "For the past week," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word, "I have been systematically humiliated, belittled, and treated like hired help by my own son and his wife. They have told you, told my grandchildren, and told anyone who would listen that I am a poor, delusional old woman who makes up stories about success to feel important." I opened the folder and began pulling out documents. "This is the deed to this hotel. This is my corporate registration. These are financial statements showing my net worth of $47 million. And this," I said, holding up the final document, "is a record of every charge Marcus and Isla have made to the credit cards I provided them, thinking I was helping family members who cared about me." The silence was deafening. Even the children had stopped fidgeting, sensing the gravity of the moment, though they couldn't understand it. $68,000 in the past 6 months, I announced. Spa treatments, shopping sprees, expensive dinners, luxury vacations, all charged to my accounts while they told people I was broke and they were supporting me out of charity. Isla found her voice first, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Norma, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" I cut her off. "Explain how you screamed at my employees, calling me a maid and telling them not to waste time speaking to me? Explain how you've spent years poisoning my grandchildren against me, telling them I'm a liar and a burden. Explain how you've been planning to abandon me in a state facility the moment I become inconvenient." Marcus finally spoke, his voice shaking. "Mom, we can work this out. This is all just a misunderstanding." I turned to look at my son, the boy I had raised alone, the man I had supported and loved unconditionally for 47 years. "No, Marcus, this isn't a misunderstanding. This is exactly what you intended. You wanted a mother who was grateful for scraps of attention, who would provide free money and free babysitting without asking for respect in return. You wanted someone you could use without consequence." I pulled out my phone and pressed a number I had programmed earlier. "Detective Morrison, it's Norma Whitman." "Yes, I'm ready for you now." The effect was immediate and devastating. Isla shot to her feet so quickly she knocked over her wine glass, the red liquid spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. "You called the police?" she shrieked, her composure finally cracking completely. "You called the police on your own family?" "I called the police on people who have been defrauding me," I corrected. "The fact that we're related is irrelevant to the law." Marcus was on his feet now too, his hands shaking as he reached toward me. "Mom, please, think about what you're doing. Think about the children. They don't deserve to see their parents arrested. You should have thought about the children before you taught them to despise their grandmother," I replied. "You should have thought about them before you decided their inheritance was more important than their relationship with me." The dinner guests were gathering their belongings, clearly eager to escape the family drama unfolding before them. I didn't blame them. This wasn't their fault, and they didn't deserve to be trapped in our private hell. As they filed out, offering awkward apologies and promises to keep in touch that no one believed, Isla made one last desperate attempt to regain control. "You're making a huge mistake," she hissed, her beautiful face twisted with rage and panic. "We're your family. We're all you have. If you do this, you'll be alone forever." I looked at her, this woman who had spent 5 years systematically destroying my relationship with my son and grandchildren, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades: complete and utter peace. "Isla," I said quietly, "I've been alone for years. The only difference is that now I'm choosing it." The sound of footsteps in the hallway announced the arrival of Detective Morrison and his partner. As they entered the elegant dining room, their presence seemed to shrink Isla and Marcus, reducing them from the confident, entitled people they had been all week to frightened, cornered animals. "Mrs. Whitman?" Detective Morrison approached me with professional courtesy. "Are these the individuals you wish to press charges against?" I looked at my son one last time, hoping against hope to see some trace of remorse, some sign that the boy I had raised was still somewhere inside the man who had laughed at my humiliation. But Marcus was looking at me with pure hatred now, his mask finally slipping completely. "You vindictive old bitch," he snarled. "You're destroying this family over money." And in that moment, I knew I was making the right choice. The legal proceedings that followed moved with surprising swiftness. Richard had prepared our case so thoroughly that Marcus and Isla's attorney, paid for, ironically, with my money, advised them to accept a plea agreement rather than face trial. The charges of credit card fraud and financial elder abuse carried serious penalties, but the real punishment was the public exposure of their deception. Within a week of their arrest, the local newspapers had picked up the story. "Hotel heiress discovers family's financial fraud." "During vacation," read the headline in the business section. The article detailed how a successful businesswoman had been systematically abused and defrauded by her own son and daughter-in-law, painting a picture that was both devastating and completely accurate. I didn't grant interviews or seek publicity. I didn't need to. The facts spoke for themselves. Marcus and Isla were banned from all Whitman hospitality properties. Their credit cards were canceled, their access to my accounts revoked, and the monthly payments I had been making toward their mortgage immediately stopped. Within 30 days, They were forced to sell their house and move into a cramped apartment across town. But the financial consequences were nothing compared to the social ones. The story spread through their social circles like wildfire. The country club membership I had been paying for was canceled. The private school where Emma and Jake attended, tuition courtesy of Grandma Norma, required immediate payment of overdue fees or disenrollment. Friends who had enjoyed expensive dinners and lavish parties funded by my money suddenly became very busy when Marcus or Isla called. I watched it all unfold from the peaceful distance of my penthouse, feeling nothing but relief. 3 months after that terrible dinner, I received a letter. The return address was Marcus's new apartment, and the handwriting was Isla's, though it was shaky and desperate compared to her usual perfect penmanship. "Dear Norma," it began, "I hope you will find it in your heart to forgive us for our mistakes. We have learned our lesson and want to make things right. The children miss their grandmother terribly, and Marcus realizes now how wrong he was to let me come between you. Please give us another chance to be the family you deserve." I read the letter twice, then carefully folded it and placed it in my filing cabinet next to the police reports and court documents. It wasn't an apology. It was another manipulation. Another attempt to access my resources now that theirs had dried up. The real Marcus, the one who had called me a vindictive old bitch when faced with consequences for his actions, had shown me exactly who he was. Isla's letter was just confirmation that neither of them had learned anything except that their actions had financial consequences. I never responded. Instead, I began building the life I should have been living all along. I sold 2 of my smaller properties and used the money to establish the Whitman Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to preventing elder abuse and supporting seniors who had been abandoned by their families. The foundation's headquarters occupied the top floor of my newest hotel in downtown Tampa, and I threw myself into the work with an energy I hadn't felt in years. The foundation became my real family. Dr. Patricia Chen, a gerontologist who became our medical director, was the daughter I had never had. James Sullivan, our legal advocate, reminded me of what Marcus could have been if he had chosen integrity over entitlement. Maria Rodriguez, who ran our support groups, had survived her own family's financial abuse and understood the particular pain of being betrayed by those you loved most. Together, we helped dozens of seniors reclaim their lives and their dignity. We provided legal assistance, financial counseling, and most importantly, a community of people who understood that family was about more than blood relations. My grandchildren remained a source of sadness, but even that pain began to heal with time. Emma and Jake were young enough that Marcus and Isla's poison might not be permanent. I established trust funds for their college